There is no way that being one of the strongest beings in any given galaxy was supposed to be easy, but Omni-Man's life was particularly difficult. From growing up under a strict and violent regime to being exiled from both worlds he loved, the story of Nolan Grayson is pretty complicated, and today we are breaking all of it down. Let's get into it. First, we need to understand what makes Omni-Man's story stand out. It's captivating because it blends massive, world-shaking power with a deeply personal identity crisis that unfolds over hundreds of years. Nolan Grayson arrives on Earth as something close to a god, builds a life that feels completely human, and then tears it all apart when the truth finally surfaces.
Our most trusted officers were each given a planet to weaken by themselves. I was one of those lucky few.
What follows a fall from grace that steep is a long, messy reconstruction of who he is and what he stands for. His journey goes far beyond the simple hero to villain trope we see in so many comics. It's layers and layers of loyalty, guilt, love, and loss, and the slow realization that the life he was sent to live as a lie ended up meaning more than the truth he came from. When Omni-Man is first introduced, he fits perfectly into the role of Earth's greatest champion. He's calm in the face of danger, overwhelmingly powerful, and carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone who has already seen everything the world can throw at him. For decades, he protects the planet from threats both massive and obscure, domestic and galactic, building a reputation that places him above every other hero.
I'm from the planet Viltrum. My government sent me here to help protect the people of your world.
Governments rely on him, civilians admire him, and fellow heroes respect him. He is the Earth's strongest pillar and weapon. At home with Debbie, he's a devoted husband, engaged and attentive in a way that makes their relationship feel indistinguishable from the real thing. With Mark, he plays the role of the proud father, encouraging him, guiding him, and waiting patiently for the day his powers finally manifest. These moments ground him and provide a sense of normalcy that contrasts with the larger-than-life image the world sees and demands from him.
Guess who's finally getting his powers?
Are you sure?
Pretty sure. Threw a trash bag into space. At work.
Even so, there are subtle hints that something about Nolan is slightly off. He reacts to certain situations with a level of detachment that doesn't quite match the emotional weight of the moment. He observes from a position of superiority and rarely allows his decisions to be questioned. He understands human behavior, but there's a faint sense that he is mimicking it rather than fully experiencing it. At first, it just seems like the personality of a seasoned hero, someone who has learned to stay composed no matter what. Over time, it becomes clear that this route of his distance runs much deeper than that.
There's a dragon behind you! Now do something!
I'm on vacation with my beautiful wife. Let Cecil earn his paycheck.
Mark gaining his powers is the event that shifts everything. It's the moment Nolan has been waiting for and dreading, all wrapped in one. It introduces something he can't control. For the first time, his mission and his personal life are overlapping, and that forces him to confront everything at once. His true purpose and his fake life. The revelation of Nolan's true origin redefines everything that came before it. He isn't simply an alien who chose to protect Earth out of the goodness of his heart. He is part of the Viltrumite Empire, a civilization built on conquest, survival of the fittest, and absolute dominance. His history is soaked in blood, shaped by a brutal process that eliminated the weak and elevated only the strongest. What resulted was a race that saw itself as inherently superior and destined to rule, and Nolan was fully bought into it, at least at first.
Why was the Purge a blessing? Think well before you answer. You've seen what failure brings.
Because the Purge made us stronger.
His assignment to Earth was never about protection, it was about preparation. He was sent to blend in, gain trust, and slowly weaken the planet's ability to resist. On top of that, Mark was supposed to be a little more than an experiment to see if human DNA and Viltrumite DNA could be successfully mixed to further the expansion of the Empire. Every act of heroism, every battle he fought was part of a long-term strategy designed to make Earth more comfortable with relying on Viltrumite power, and thus easier to conquer when the time came. What makes this so effective is how thoroughly Nolan lived his cover. He built an entire life around his identity as a harmless hero. He formed relationships, created routines, and immersed himself in a world he was supposed to view as temporary. Over time, that immersion started to blur the lines between his mission and his reality. By the time he reveals the truth and begins part 2 of his mission, it's clear that Nolan is no longer operating with the same certainty he once had.
This isn't how I wanted to do this, but I don't have a choice. It's time for you to know where I really come from. I am from Viltrum.
He still believes in Viltrumite superiority, but there's hesitation in how he explains it. There's an underlying tension between what he was trained to believe and what he has experienced on Earth. Humanity seeped into him, and it had a major impact, but it hadn't completely taken over. The massacre of the Guardians of the Globe marks the point where Nolan's hidden identity was finally and fully exposed. Up until this moment, he existed in 2 worlds at once, the public hero and the secret agent. The attack collapses that separation in an instant. The fight itself is brutal and deeply unsettling to watch. They put up a good fight, but Nolan dismantles the team with efficiency and overwhelming force, eliminating almost each member before they can escape.
Darkwing, War Woman, the others. I know you killed them, Nolan!
These are some of the most powerful heroes on the planet, and they fall within minutes. The speed and violence of the encounter made it clear that Nolan had been holding back for years. They were just no match for his Viltrumite strength. Beyond the physical destruction, the true gut punch comes from betrayal. The Guardians, the entire planet, trusted him completely. They fought alongside him, relied on him, and saw him as an ally. Nolan eliminating them shows just how far he is willing to go to fulfill his mission, even after decades of living among them. The Viltrum Empire still had a strong hold on his psyche at that point, and given the consequences of betraying him, it's not hard to see why. At the same time, the fact that he waited so long raises important questions. If his mission required all of this, why did he delay it for decades? The answer lies in the internal conflict that has been quietly building within him. Something about his time on Earth made him hesitate, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. And back to his son. Mark's becoming invincible introduced a new layer to Nolan's story. What was once a solitary mission becomes a shared responsibility, at least in Nolan's eyes.
We need to get Earth ready to join the Viltrum Empire. We can finally do what we were meant to do, be who we were meant to be.
Mark represents the future of the Viltrumite presence on Earth. A second chance to ensure the mission succeeds. Training. Mark starts as a practical necessity, more than a fatherly duty. Nolan taught him how to use his powers, how to fight, and how to survive. But these lessons quickly take on a deeper meaning. Mark approaches heroism with genuine compassion. He wants to save people, protect the innocent, and do what he believes is right. His perspective is shaped entirely by his human upbringing, not by the Viltrumites' twisted ideology. This difference was the beginning of the end. Nolan tries to guide Mark toward a more pragmatic view of the world, emphasizing strength and inevitability.
We can help them. We can stop war, eliminate hunger, give them medical technology centuries ahead of what they have now.
But Mark resists resisted it all. He held on to his belief that individual lives matter, humans matter. Those opposing viewpoints turned father and son against each other emotionally. Both of them were trying to shape the other's understanding of what it means to have power, but they couldn't reach an agreement. For Nolan, this dynamic was deeply unsettling. The way he felt about Mark was proof that Nolan's time on Earth was real. It changed him in ways he didn't expect. The values Nolan was supposed to ignore took root after he started his family, making it impossible to keep his Viltrumite mission separate from his personal life. As suspicion builds and Nolan's behavior becomes more erratic, the truth shatters his carefully constructed life. Debbie's realization is particularly devastating. She learns not only that her husband is a remorseless killer, but also that their entire relationship was a lie.
Is Mom's life worthless?
In the grand scheme of things, yes.
Debbie.
It took months for her to recover from the heartbreak, but it began when she saw him nearly kill their son and heard Nolan call her a pet.
I do love your mother, but she's more like a pet to me.
A pet?
Even as she watched from miles away in complete safety provided by the government, what she witnessed nearly destroyed her. Nolan's attempts to explain himself reveal the cracks in his own understanding. He talks about duty, about the inevitability of Viltrumite rule, about the insignificance of human resistance, but his words lack the convictions they once would have carried. There's a sense that he's repeating ideas he was taught rather than expressing beliefs he fully stands behind. He was brainwashed, but his actions were still horrific and mortifying. And that battle between Nolan and Mark, it was the centerpiece of his entire story. Again, he tried to persuade Mark first, but Mark was adamant that his dad's philosophy was wrong. Nolan thought that if he could make Mark understand the truth about Viltrum, he would join him willingly. From Nolan's perspective, this outcome only made sense. Viltrumites are stronger, more advanced, and ultimately destined to dominate. Resistance seemed pointless, and conquering Earth was basically a gift to the weak humans who populated it. Mark's refusal changed everything and cornered Nolan into a position where he had to either abandon his mission or enforce it through violence, even against his own child.
I will burn this planet down before I spend another minute living among these animals.
After all, on Viltrum, beating your child to a pulp was nothing special. On that planet, they believed that if someone died, they weren't worthy of living in the first place. Nolan's own mother nearly killed him during training. This wasn't special or unique. It was commonplace. So his fight with Mark was a devastating confrontation that pushed them both to their limits. Nolan used his full strength not to kill Mark if he didn't have to, but to break his spirit. He demonstrated the fragility of human life in the most extreme ways possible, even using Mark's own body as a weapon, all to help Mark to see the world as he does. Despite the overwhelming difference in power, Mark still doesn't give in. He continues to fight, not because he believes he can win, but because he refuses to abandon his values, and he still thinks his father is in there somewhere.
Someone's controlling you! Dad, tell me how to stop them! Let my dad go! Let him go!
This persistence shifts the dynamic of the fight. Nolan may have the physical advantage, but Mark's conviction becomes something Nolan can't overpower. This confrontation forces Nolan to face the reality of what he's done. The life he built on Earth wasn't just a cover, it was a genuine part of who he became. Losing it is more than a strategic setback. Losing Debbie and Mark was intense and real. It was a deeply personal loss that Nolan was in no way equipped to process, and the moment that ultimately stops, Nolan comes from a place he didn't expect. When he questions what Mark will have left after everyone he loves is gone, he expects an answer rooted in fear or doubt. Instead, Mark responds with unwavering loyalty, expressing that he would still have his father. Despite everything he'd done, Mark still saw his dad as family.
Think, Mark, what will you have after 500 years?
You, Dad. I still have you.
That connection, which Nolan tried to ignore and suppress, was finally impossible to ignore. For the first time, Nolan hesitates in a way that completely disrupts his mission. He can't reconcile the role of conqueror with the role of father. His entire understanding of his life's purpose was irreparably fractured when he saw Mark laying there, bloody and still expressing love towards him. Nolan couldn't bring himself to kill Mark after that, and instead, he just leaves Earth. It's a moment of total emotional collapse. He abandons his mission, his identity, and the life he built, choosing distance over resolution. He exiled himself knowing that no one on Viltrum or Earth would ever forgive him for what he had done. He failed on all fronts.
You were one of our greatest warriors. How did a mere moment on Earth turn you into a weak, sentimental traitor?
Nolan's time in exile marks the beginning of his transformation. Without a mission to follow or the hero/dad role to play, he is left alone with his thoughts. He finally begins to question the beliefs that shaped his entire life, and it's depressing. He reflects on his actions, the people he hurt, and the values he once accepted without hesitation. The more he examines Viltrumite ideology, the more he recognizes how flawed and evil it really is. Their emphasis on strength and domination starts to feel hollow, especially when compared to the connections he formed on Earth. This process is slow and uncomfortable. Nolan isn't used to questioning himself or the Empire, and he doesn't have a clear path forward for rebuilding his identity. He's caught between two worlds, no longer fully aligned with either. When the Viltrumites finally catch up to him, he all but allows himself to be captured as a criminal to the Empire. His spirit was gone. Whatever the Viltrums did to him next, he figured he more than deserved it.
They're gonna execute you, bro. They are, yes. I feel shame and regret for my actions.
But during his imprisonment, while he was waiting for his execution, he met Alan the alien. That relationship helped Nolan see himself in a new light. He started to see himself as redeemable, and it gave him hope. He escaped, and eventually, Nolan began to build a new life, forming relationships that were all his own instead of being tied to a mission or a disguise. This was incredibly significant because it changed the way he approached connections. For the first time, the people around him weren't tools or temporary attachments. They were important, and not just as extensions of him, but as their own being. They were individuals. Nolan was finally allowing himself to exist without the constant pressure of Viltrumite expectations hanging over him, and that became even more meaningful with the birth of his second son, Oliver. After he narrowly avoided execution with Alan's help, Nolan began a new life on the planet Thraxa. He started a new relationship with a Thraxan named Andressa, and as a result, Oliver is half Thraxan. But Thraxans were a species that lived drastically shorter lives than humans or Viltrumites. Thraxans age rapidly, mature quickly, and experience life at a pace that feels almost unnatural compared to what Nolan is used to.
Your brother ages quicker than you, but far slower than my people. I'll be gone before he can form a sentence. When Nolan was here, that was fine. He could be raised by his father.
This difference meant Nolan had to confront something he never had to think about with Mark in the same way. Time. With Mark, Nolan always had the luxury of assuming there would be centuries to shape him, guide him, and eventually bring him into alignment with Viltrumite ideals. With Oliver, that wasn't the case. Oliver grew up at an accelerated rate, learning, changing, and forming his identity far faster than Nolan can fully process. Moments that would normally stretch across years are compressed into days and weeks. His opinion of Nolan developed more quickly too. As a result, Nolan's approach to fatherhood had to evolve quickly and dramatically too. He became more present, more direct, and more emotionally engaged than he ever was before. There was a sense of urgency in how he raises Oliver, but also a level of care that feels genuine. Nolan wasn't trying to mold Oliver into a soldier for a soulless empire. He wanted to prepare his son to protect a universe that he finally understood to be far more complex than any brainwashed Viltrumite ever realized. Oliver himself introduces a new kind of dynamic into Nolan's life. Because of his mixed bloodline and the fact that he was taken from his home planet as a baby, he doesn't fully fit into any single identity. He isn't human or purely Viltrumite and or fully Thraxan either. That mirrors Nolan's own internal conflict in a way that Mark didn't. Mark was the bridge between Viltrum and Earth, but Oliver represents something even more uncertain. A completely new path that isn't defined by either side. At the same time, Oliver's rapid development means he begins asking difficult questions early on. Questions about strength, purpose, and morality.
Life is precious. We don't just take it.
It's not precious. People kill each other all the time, and most people aren't even special like us.
And unlike Nolan in his earlier years, Oliver doesn't accept simple, rigid answers. He challenged ideas, tested boundaries, and made both Mark and Nolan think more carefully about the values they held. This created moments where Nolan taught against his own upbringing. He knew that the lessons he once believed without question were incomplete and dangerous. Instead of reinforcing a Viltrumite ideology, he emphasized connection, understanding, and the importance of personal choice. There's also a quiet layer of guilt that runs through Nolan's relationship with Oliver. He knows how he failed Mark. He knows the damage he caused. That history shapes how he interacts with Oliver, who after learning more about his dad, formed a pretty negative opinion about him.
You said you didn't love my other mom, that she was a mistake. Am I a mistake too? I wanted to be just like you.
This made Nolan more cautious, reflective, aware of the consequences of his influence. He didn't take that for granted. In many ways, Oliver becomes Nolan's second chance. Not to erase the past, but to maybe make up for it and do better moving forward. However, this new life is fragile. The peace Nolan finds with Oliver and the Thraxans is temporary, existing in the shadow of the empire he abandoned. The same choices that allowed him to grow also put a target on his back. The Viltrumites don't overlook defection, and Nolan's decision to build another life only deepens their view of him as a traitor. When that past inevitably catches up to him, it threatens Oliver, Mark, and any chance at redemption. That raises the stakes in a way Nolan can't ignore. This isn't just about his own survival or redemption anymore. He needs to protect his sons and everything he'd started to believe in. He has to believe in growth, change, and the possibility of breaking away from the cycle he was born into. And that makes the coming conflict with the Viltrumite Empire far more personal than anything he faced before.
Their coalition thinks it is strong, but they will shatter before our strength, our devotion, our vengeance.
When Nolan is eventually confronted by the Viltrumites, the difference between who he was and who he has become is undeniable. The old Nolan is dead and gone. He no longer embodies their toxic ideals. His experiences have changed him, and that change makes him a liability. The Empire views his actions as betrayal. From their perspective, Nolan failed his mission and allowed himself to be influenced by weaker beings. His hesitation, his attachments, and his refusal to fully commit to their cause all mark him as someone who can't be trusted. Nolan is no longer a representative of the Empire. Against all odds, he actually became someone who stood in opposition to it, even if that opposition isn't fully defined at first. Nolan basically became a threat that needed to be dealt with. Nolan's eventual reunion with Mark is complicated and emotionally charged. Their relationship is still shaped by the events on Earth, and the damage caused by their previous confrontation hasn't been erased. Mark approaches Nolan with caution, balancing anger with a willingness to understand and team up for the greater good. He has seen more of the universe by this point and has a clearer picture of what the Viltrumite Empire represents. That perspective allows him to see Nolan in a more nuanced way, even if forgiveness doesn't come easily. For Nolan, this reunion represents another chance to rebuild something he thought was lost.
I made a mistake, and I've thought about you every day since...
A mistake!
Son,
No, you don't get to call me that anymore.
He doesn't try to force his beliefs onto Mark anymore. Instead, he approaches the relationship with a level of humility that wasn't present before. Nolan inevitably becomes increasingly involved in the conflict against the Viltrumite Empire. His knowledge of their tactics, culture, and weaknesses makes him an important figure in the fight against them. Plus, he sees it as his duty. When it finally starts, the war shows the scale of the Viltrumite threat. Their numbers were dwindling, but their influence extended across multiple worlds, and their approach to conquest left absolutely no room for negotiation. Nolan's insider perspective was crucial in understanding how to challenge them, and after causing so much carnage in the Empire's name, the least he could do was use his abilities to save his sons and stop the Viltrumites once and for all. This role means Nolan had to confront his past in a direct way. He was actively working to counter the system he once served.
Nolan made us a list of all these awesome Viltrumite weaknesses and weapons.
before I was sent to Earth, it was my mission to ensure these threats could never be used against us.
Every action he took carried the weight of his previous choices, adding an intense determination to every decision he made moving forward. But Nolan's path toward redemption wasn't quick or straightforward. He didn't just get to erase his past or avoid the consequences of his actions. The people he killed remain gone, and the damage he caused continues to affect those around him. What changed was his approach to responsibility. Instead of avoiding or justifying his actions, he accepted them. He recognized the harm he caused and was making a conscious effort to move forward in a different way. When they finally meet, Thrag offers Nolan tepid forgiveness and another chance to devote himself to the Viltrumite cause. It would have been easy to fall back into his old beliefs and save his own skin, but Nolan didn't take the bait. He continued to stand with the Coalition and remained steadfast in his decision to stop the Empire.
It has created the Scourge virus
He committed genocide on his own people.
to stop us from committing it on others.
Even after Thrag almost murdered him, Mark and Oliver, Nolan was determined to stop them, and this time the war he was fighting was his choice, and he believed wholeheartedly in the mission. In the end, Nolan would end up as a casualty of the war, but not before seeing it through to the bitter end. He devoted the time he had left alive, every ounce of his power and every fiber of his being, to stopping the evil he once helped perpetuate. By the time Nolan's story reaches its later stages, he was a completely different person. The journey from loyal Viltrumite soldier to conflicted father and reluctant ally to dedicated Viltrumite opposition in a larger war reshaped his identity in lasting ways. His legacy is tied closely to Mark, who carries forward the lessons learned from their shared experiences. Through Mark, Nolan's influence continues, but it takes on a new form, one that emphasizes balance, empathy, and the careful use of power. Nolan's story leaves behind a complex image. He isn't remembered solely as a hero or a villain. He exists somewhere in between, defined by both his failures and his growth, which is something pretty much everyone can relate to. Before he died, Nolan tried his best to protect others, and it made him whole. Omni-Man remains compelling because the inner tension and redemption truly defines him. His story is built on contradictions that never fully disappear. He carried the mindset of a Viltrumite while grappling with the emotions of a human. Those two sides of him were constantly in conflict until they weren't. At a certain point, arguably his lowest, Nolan decided who he was and the universe was better for it. But that initial internal struggle keeps his character dynamic, relevant, and relatable. Just like the humans he once looked down upon, he wasn't locked into a single role or perspective. He changed in response to his experiences, learned from his mistakes, and adapted in momentous ways that felt both necessary and earned. He wanted to shape Mark and shape Earth to his will, but in the end, it was the other way around. From his initial deception on Earth to his eventual break from the Viltrumite Empire, Omni-Man's story ultimately boils down to the all-too-familiar desire to form a real identity all your own. Nolan spent so much of his life trying to live up to the expectations placed on him while fighting the person he felt himself becoming. In the end, no matter what he chose, it was all him. By the end, Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, stood as a character defined by growth rather than perfection. his story doesn't offer easy answers or comfortable resolutions. Instead, it presents a long, complicated path shaped by choices, consequences, and the ongoing effort to become something better than what he started as. And he may be a full-blooded Viltrumite, but it doesn't get much more human than that. If you like this analysis, subscribe for more Invincible breakdowns every week. Thanks for watching.